Hey everyone, this is Tapan Sharma here, and before getting started on the actual tutorial, I want to give you an overview about my new course. And the tutorial that we'll be building in this video is a part of my course. So yeah, I'm working on a new course about Laravel with Inertia.js and Svelte as a front end, and we'll be using Tailwind CSS as our CSS library. And the upcoming video is an intro video about my new course, and after that you can go ahead and watch the tutorial. So yeah, let's go ahead and watch the intro. Hey everyone, this is Tapan Sharma here, and I'm super excited to share with you my new course about Laravel, Inertia, Svelte, and Tailwind. So I'll be using the Silt stack to build applications, and in this course, as the name suggests, we'll be learning Laravel, Inertia, and Svelte as a front-end stack. And along the way we'll be building 3 projects. So I've created a Notion page to guide you through the stuff that we'll be covering in this course. So in the first section of the course, we'll start by installing Laravel and setting up Inertia and Svelte from scratch. So we'll be looking at setting up the server side, setting up client side, customizing the progress bar using Ziggy, and we'll also look at how to set up server side rendering along with Ziggy support. And in the next section, we'll be building a simple comment app to give you an overview about how Inertia works, and along the way we'll work on handling forms. We'll look at how we can display validation messages, how we can define form callbacks, and how to reset the form on successful request. We'll also look at Laravel's API resources to properly format the data on the front end. And in the third section, we'll actually start by building a project called Students Management System, and here we'll be learning the CRUD fundamentals. So we'll look at how we can create, read, update, and delete, so the basic stuff, and also implement server-side paginations. And in the fourth section, we will be looking at how we can implement authorization and implement roles and permissions in an Inertia-based app. So we won't be using any packages here. We'll develop everything from scratch. So we'll implement roles CRUD and also implement authorization gate checks on both front end and back end. And in the fifth section, we'll be continuing the data table, that is the student management system, and build a feature-rich data table. So here we'll be learning how to implement pagination dropdown to implement pagination dynamically. We'll also work on multi-column search functionality. We'll also implement bulk actions to delete multiple data and export students' data. We'll also learn how to build filters and also implement dependent dropdowns. And finally, in the sixth section, so this is the final project of our course, and here we'll be building a fully functional Laravel Breeze clone. So as the name suggests, we'll be working on all the features that Laravel Breeze offers. So this includes login and registration functionality. We'll implement GitHub login with Laravel Socialite. We'll also implement modals using Svelte, and also implement forgot password and email verification functionality. And along the way, we'll dive into the source code of a package called Laravel Breeze, because we are building that clone, and implement necessary features accordingly. And later, I'll add a new section about deployment. So that's something in progress, and I'll add that section later. But for now, I'm launching this, and especially for the YouTube subscribers, this course is kind of an early release, so I haven't launched this in the Udemy marketplace yet. So this course is right now in private mode, and to access it you need to use a password, which I'll be providing in the description below. And yeah, I guess you probably know what are the stuff that we'll be building in this course, and if you are interested in building applications using Inertia and Svelte as the front end, then this is the course for you. You can go ahead and check it out. Click on the link below, and you can go ahead and check out the course on the Udemy marketplace. And on each of the sections, there's an overview video about the project that we'll be building in that section. So you can go ahead and check that out. And if you like the content, then you can go ahead and hit that buy button. And yeah, I hope that you'll learn a lot of stuff in this course. And in the description below, I'll be attaching the course link along with the coupon code and along with the password as well, since this is private for now, and later I'll make it public once I complete the course. So Yeah, if you have any questions, then let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you inside the course. Hey everyone, this is Tapan Sharma here, and I'm back with a new series. And in this series we'll be looking into building a mini students management system with Inertia, Laravel and Svelte. So we'll be using Svelte as our front-end stack. So there are a lot of tutorials covering Vue and React, but I didn't see much content around Svelte stack, so I decided to create some content. And I personally love Svelte a lot. I've been enjoying to write code on it. It has a really good DX, and yeah, all the other stuff are really great. So yeah, we'll be looking at building a CRUD app using Laravel, Inertia and Svelte. So yeah, let's go ahead and test out the project. And by the way, this is a Breeze package that is built on the Svelte stack. So I built that package myself. It's open source, and I'll be linking that in the description below. So okay, let's go ahead and test out the CRUD app. So here we will be looking into the student management system, and we'll implement the server-side pagination, as you can see, along with the state that is maintained on the URL. So yeah, that's one of the stuff. And we'll also work on image uploads. We'll be using the Sparty media library to accomplish this, and create a new student. And we'll also work on validations. If we try to pass in some data that already exists, then we'll also see that validation. And we'll also work on file uploads. So we'll also work on implementing dependent dropdown. As you can see, depending on the item selected, this item is being rendered accordingly. So yeah, we'll also look into that. Let's click on save. So as you can see, the validation is also working in here. I'll just add a random data and click on save. And we'll also work on displaying these toast messages. We'll also work on deleting records and with the confirm dialog from with JavaScript. And yeah, this is everything that we are going to work on, and I hope that you'll learn some new stuff along the way. And yeah, that's the intro part, and in the next part we'll be looking into setting up the project, setting up Inertia and all the other stuff. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, so in this video we'll start by installing Laravel, setting up our Laravel project, and then set up Inertia with Svelte. And in the later videos we'll be looking into defining the database, setting up the seeders and all the other stuff. So let's start by creating a new project. And by the way, the repo for this project will be in this link and in this repository, and I'll be linking this, and I'll be linking this in the description below, so you can go ahead and check that out. Okay, so let's start. I'm gonna create a new project in my desktop, and I'm gonna name it Inertia Svelte Students Management. Let's hit enter, and while this is installing, let's go ahead and check out the documentation for Inertia.js. And if you are not familiar with setting up Svelte Inertia, I recommend you to watch my video, which you can check out by clicking the eye icon somewhere around in the top here. So in that video we'll be taking a brief look into how we can set up Inertia with Svelte. So I'll be following that process step by step in this video as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out our command, and Laravel has been installed. So let's cd into that, and let's open up in our code editor. And behind the scenes I have also created a new database. So if we go ahead and check out the phpMyAdmin, then as you can see I have named it Inertia Svelte Students Management. So I'll be using that. And again, this thing is lagging a lot. Git repository was found in the parent folders of the workspace or the open files. Okay, I think I did this earlier and this was not deleted properly. Okay, let it be, and maybe we can initialize a new repository in here. Remote origin already exists. Okay, I think I have to remove this thing properly, so I'll just open that in my file manager and be right back. Okay, let's initialize a new Git repository, and now we can add that remote origin. And what else do we have? Okay, we need to make changes to our env. The database name is gonna be Inertia Svelte Students Management, and let's also commit everything in here. So I'm gonna give it a commit of initial commit, and let's push it. Okay, what's our next step? The next step is to install and set up Inertia. So let's go ahead and check out the documentation in the server side. So we'll start by the server side setup. Let's install. Okay, I think instead of doing this, what I am going to do is I'm going to use my own package, which I recently released. So that package does all of this stuff by default. So we can check that out. That's inside Breeze Svelte, I guess. Yep. So we can use this package, and this is gonna set everything up for us. So yep, no wasting of our times anymore. So let's go ahead and copy this command, and I'll just clear it up. So composer require Tapan, Sharma, Breeze Svelte, and I'm also passing in the dev flag. So I'll be right back once this finishes installing. While that is installing, we can check out the documentation. So to install the Svelte version, what we can do is we can pass in the Svelte flag, or we can use the interactive command or installer to install it. So let's go ahead and do that. Artisan Breeze installed, and as you can see, we have this Svelte stack in here. So I'll choose Svelte, and I don't need dark support, so it's a no by default. So we can hit enter. Would you prefer pests? Okay, I am not going to cover tests in this case, but still I'm going to install pest. Maybe we can continue this in the future by also integrating it with tests. So this is going to install everything and set everything up. And what do we have? Okay, we can wait, and I'll be right back once this finishes installing. Okay, everything is now set up. So let's go ahead and serve our project, and we also need to run npm run dev to build our assets. So I'll just also keep that running. Okay, we don't have Vit. I think I need to. Okay, Inertia Students Management, we already have Vit, right? So why is that giving that error? Okay, let's open up the project, and let's go ahead and check out package.json. We should have Vit. npm, we already have npm as well. So why is it giving that error? Okay, I think we need to run npm install, or maybe we don't have to, but not really sure why it's not working. Okay, it added 20 packages, and now it's working. Okay, let's go ahead and check it out. So this is the welcome page, and we already have login and register pages set up for us. So I'll just register a new user in this video, and in the later videos we'll be working on setting up the models and migrations for our students. So I'm gonna name it admin. Password is password. Click on register. Okay, we haven't run the migrations, so let's go ahead and do that. Open that up in my VS Code, and I also want to zoom in a bit so that you can see it properly. And let's run the migrations. That's done. Let's go ahead and reload, and this should now work properly. Click on register, and we are logged in. So yeah, that's it for this part, and in the next part we'll be looking at setting up the models and migrations and all the other stuff. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, so in this video we'll look into setting up the database and migrations and models for our students and classes and sections. So first we'll look into the database structure, and then we'll define the models and migrations. So as you can see, we have classes and sections. So each class has basic attributes like ID and name, and sections also have ID name with a foreign key class ID. So a class can have many sections, and a section belongs to a certain class, and a student belongs to a certain class and a section, and these also have basic attributes like name, email, and phone number. So you can add your own depending on the use case. So yeah, that's the basic structure, database structure of our project. And to make things a bit easier, what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste the code from an already existing repository, because these are really simple stuff and I don't want to waste my time defining all these classes and models from scratch, so these will take time. So I'll just copy and paste these from this project, and I think I can't do that from a browser based editor, so I have to open up a new instance. So I'll just go ahead and do that. I'll just remove this from here. Okay, so I have opened up this project in my local editor, and now I can copy and paste these. So I'll just copy the classes, this section, and the student model and paste that in our current project. And after the model, we can copy the migration files, so classes, sections, and students. Let's go ahead and paste that in the migrations folder. What else do we have? We also have seeders, so I'll just copy the classes seeder. I think we only need this seeder for this case, because from that class we will be creating the data for other models accordingly. So we can go ahead and copy paste that in seeders table or the folder. And we also need factories, so we'll be using factories as well. So I'll copy the classes section and student factory. So let's paste that in here. And what else do we have? Okay, let's check out the seeders and the database seeder. Here I think, okay, we have users table seeder as well. We don't need that for now, so I'll just copy this command and paste that in my database seeder. Okay, we need to run this call, so I'll just copy everything and remove other stuff from here, so we can get rid of other classes. So yeah, we are almost done, and I'll walk you through the code what this class does, but I want to remove this instance because my laptop is lagging a lot. Okay, so now we can check out the classes seeder. And okay, we already have defined the relationships already for this, so let's go ahead and check that out first. So it has one property called name, and it has many sections, so that is self-explanatory. And inside section we have fillables as class ID and name, and it belongs to a class. I think instead of classes we can define it as class. This should work. This belongs to a class and it has students, so has many students, and a student belongs to a class and section. So yep, this looks good. And okay, this thing is not really needed, this search thing. Maybe I'll just implement this somewhere in the future, but for now we don't need this. Or maybe we might need it. Let's see. If we need it, then we'll use it, otherwise we'll keep it as it is. Okay, that's done. And inside the seeders we have a classes seeder. So what we are doing is we are using the classes factory, and we are generating 10 classes, and for each sequence. So what this does is it will pass in every class instance to this sequence, and then we'll get that instance, and we are giving it a name of class and then space and then sequence index +1. So remember that since this starts from 0, so 0 to 9, so that's why we are giving it adding 1 to it. So this will finally be class 1 to 10, and each class has a section, or maybe we can also pass in as many, but what we are doing is we are passing in the count of 2, so this would also work. So a section with a value of 2, so we want to create 2 sections for each class, and we are using the state function in here. So what we can do is for first section, what we'll do is it will name it as section A, and for the second one it will name it as section B. So we can use state in state like this, and each section has 5 students. And what we are doing is we are also using the state function in here as well, and we are passing in the attributes and then also passing in the section inside the closure. And now what we are doing is we are passing in the class ID. So sections class ID. So now this will create a proper relationship for the student, which belongs to this section and the current instance of the class. So like since we have a sequence, so for this sequence, it will properly assign the foreign key for it. So yeah, that's the general flow. And finally, we are calling the create to create these records. So that's done. And inside database seeder, we are calling in the classes seeder. So this will generate all this data necessary for our project. And what else do we have? We need to migrate first. So let's go ahead and do that. So this creates 3 tables: classes, sections, and students. And let's also run the artisan dv seed. So this should seed the classes seeder. Now if you go ahead and check out our database, then we should see our data. Let's reload, and we have all these classes and sections. So let's go ahead and check out classes first. So we have classes from 1 to 10, each with their proper ID. And let's go ahead and check out the sections. So we have class ID 11 for section A and B, and so on for all the other sections as well. And finally, we have the students table. So here we have class ID 1, section ID 1 with the name, email, address. Okay, we also have address in here, so we can get rid of it or you can use this. That's up to you. And all the data looks good now. So I think we are done for this part. And in the next part, we'll start by displaying the data. So we'll define a link in here and then display the students data in a table. So yeah, that's it for this part, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, so we are finally digging into the interesting parts of the course. So we'll start by displaying the students data in this video, and in the later videos we'll look into editing, deleting, creating the data and all the other stuff. So let's start by displaying the data. So in my web.php, I'm going to define a new route. Let me just get rid of these comments and also sort the imports, and these are all defined by the breeze package. So I think inside the auth we want to define this. So I'm going to define a new resource route, and I'm going to name it students. And what's going to be the name? Okay, student controller. Let's go ahead and create that. So artisan make controller, student controller. Let's go ahead and hit enter, and now we should get the auto completion. So the first method is gonna be index, and what do we want to do in here? So we want to get all of the students data. So app model student all, and what do we want to do? We want to render students / index with the data of students. Okay, this looks good. So instead of students, I think, what do we name it here? Okay, that looks fine. So let's go ahead and create that inside. So remember that since we are using Inertia, we have to define all of these inside the resources JS folder. So inside resources JS, we have pages. So let's create a new CRUD in here. So the folder is going to be students, and let's create a new file called index.svelte. So what do we want to do in here? I'm gonna paste a simple HTML markup for the table, and later we'll also look at how we can incorporate the layout file and all the other stuff. So I'll just paste that and save it so that this would get formatted properly. Saving is, I think we can, what is this about view language server? Okay, I don't need this, so I'll just remove that here. Okay, it's Volar, I guess. Okay, this one, so I'll just uninstall it, and we have to reload it. So I'll just save this thing first, and then let's reload. Okay, the markup is ready, and what do I want to do in here? Okay, we are not getting the highlighting and all the other stuff. I think my VS Code is lagging a bit, and to extend the layout and to include the layout for this, what we can do is we can use the authenticated layout that comes with the Breeze package, but I'm not getting the auto completion in here. So authenticated layout, layout, this thing is lagging way too much. Okay, let's paste that in here, and okay, let's import this authenticated layout from, okay, this looks good. So that's imported. Let's save it. And what else can we do? Okay, we can define a route for this. So inside nav.svelte, I think. Okay, let's check out in here. So we have components and we have, what's that? We don't have that. Okay, let's check out the authenticated layout, and here we should have, okay, we have that in here, primary navigation menu. So now we can add a new nav link. Okay, let me just get rid of this to-do. This is coming from my package, so I need to make some changes in there. So where do you want to go? If you want to go to the students.index, and I want to make this thing active if the route.current is students.index, and let's give it a name of students. Let's save it, and let's go ahead and reload. And as you can see, we have a link for all the students, and if I click on it, then you'll see a simple table with the buttons of edit and delete, and we also have an add student link. And yeah, now we are gonna make some changes in here. So I'll just first comment these things properly. I don't want to see these in here. So where's that? Okay, alerts. Okay, we can't comment that out. Okay, like this we can do that. And here we have these, we are going to display the data, and here we have the pagination. Okay, let's save and load. Now we are going to display the data in here. So we are getting the data from the controller. We are passing in the data, so we can receive them as props in our view file. So to receive the props in this Svelte, what we can do is we can do export let students, and now if we go ahead and log the students, then okay, for some reason I am not getting the auto completion. So console.log students, then we should see the data. And I think what we can also do is we can make use of the resource that is provided by Laravel to properly format our data, and also make sure that we don't pass in any sensitive information to the front end. So we have all of these data. So first I want to use a resourceful route or a resource to format our data properly. So okay, let's keep that, and let's go ahead and define a new resource. So artisan make resource student resource, and let's go ahead and use that now. So what do we want to display in here? Okay, let's use all of these. I think we don't need the created add and updated add. We will need the class and section data, so we can use eager loading in here, or we can use the when loaded property provided by the resource and then pass in the data. So for that, what we also need is we need class resource and section resource. So let's go ahead and define those. Class resource and then section resource, because we also want to pass in these data and then properly format them. So first let's make changes on these. So here we only have name and ID. We don't need the description, created at, updated at, and section resource. ID, name, class, new class resource, this class, and then students is gonna be student resource collection, and then this students. I think we don't need to pass in the students, but only if we have eager loaded. In that case we might do that, but we don't need this, so we are not going to do that. And okay, we are passing in the class. So let's also do in the section model, I want to define the width property to always load the protected width class, so that we always eager load the class. And our section resource is also ready, so that's done. And our class resource is also ready. And let's go ahead and define the class and section. So the class is gonna be class resource, make this class, and section. Okay, this looks good. And we need to go to our controller, and here, instead of directly passing in the students, we can do student resource collection students. And instead of defining the students like this, I think we can directly pass this in. Let's see if we need to make any more changes, then we'll make it in the future, but for now we can do it like this. And what else do we have? Okay, since we are loading the students, we also want to define the width property in here as well. So Copilot is really good in that. So that's done. And now if we go ahead and reload, then we should see these data. Now, as you can see, we have the data prepended in our array, and these are now formatted properly with the data we need. So phone, I think it's phone number, so we can change that. And we don't, okay, email, phone number, class, this looks good. So now finally, let's go ahead and reload it once again, and we should see the desired data that we need to display in the front end. We have the ID, name, email, phone number, and the class and section. Yep, that's fine, that looks good. So in our index, what we can do is we have the students data, so we can iterate over these and then display them in here. So email, phone number, class, and section. Let's iterate over these. So to iterate over these, what we can do is we can use the each. So each students add student. Okay, GitHub Copilot is already suggesting that, but I want to type it from scratch. So let's end the each, and here we can display that. So the first thing is displaying the ID, the name, email, phone number, student dot class. So since we want to display the name, so we can pass in the name. So by the way, this class gives us an object of the class and then the name, so we access that with the dot student dot section dot name and edit and delete. And one more thing to note here is that we get the data as students. So okay, we get since we are getting the resource data, so it is prepended with a data property. So while iterating these data, we need to do students dot data, otherwise this will throw us an error. So now if we go ahead and reload, then we should see our data being displayed. So yeah, this looks good. And in the next video, we are gonna work on creating a new data. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so in this video, we will be looking at creating the student record. So whenever we click on the add student button, then what we want to do is we want to open up a new page, and in that page we want to display a form, and then we will be handling that form, sending the data to the controller, saving the data to the database, and then reloading back to the students index page. So first, what we want to do here is we want to create a new page. So I'm going to name it create.svelte, and I already have created a sample markup for this, so I'll just paste that in here before I lose it. And we'll look into this in a while. Let me just save that. And the next thing that we want to do here is we want to display this page. So for that, we have already implemented the route, I guess, because we defined a resourceful route. So the students.create and store are already defined. So to display that, let's go to the controller. So in the student controller, let's create a new method called create, which is gonna display the view. So here we want to return inertia render, and what do you want to render? We want to render the create page inside the students folder. So this should display the students create page. And what else do we want to do? We want to add the route in here. So inside add a student, in the add a student button, so that's inside index.svelte, and here we have the link. Okay, so what I want to do here is, instead of using the native a tag, I'm going to use the inertia's link tag. So using this, what's going to happen is it's going to create a an SPL like experience, so without reloading the browser. So this is going to enable the SPL like experience. So first let's import that link in here, and we don't need this inertia, we only need the link, and I'm going to replace the a tag with the link, and the href is going to be, so I'm going to use Ziggy. And if you're not sure about Ziggy, then Ziggy can be is a package that enables us to use the route helper functions in the JavaScript stack as well. So as you can see, we have the students.create route called in here, and this is going to resolve automatically just like Laravel does. So now this should redirect us to the students.create page. If we go ahead and check out, then okay, let's click on it, and now as you can see, we are redirected to the create page. And one more thing that we need to do here is we need to implement the layout. So I'm gonna implement the authenticated layout for the create page as well, and I'm gonna wrap that authenticated layout for the page content. And let's also import this. Okay, I think we need to copy the import statement as well. So define the script tag and import it. Now this should look good. Okay, this looks good. And one of the main one of the features that we need to implement here is the dependent dropdown feature. So whenever we click on class 1, then I want to display the students belonging to this class. So for that, let's first display the class data that we have in our database. So that should be simple. In the student controller, what we want to do here is we want to grab all of the classes, classroom, okay, not classroom, but classes. And we also have the class resource. So what I want to do is I want to pass that to the class resource so that it would format the data properly, and then pass that in. And now we can pass this data to the front end. Okay, so this data will be passed as a prop. So the way we receive that in the Svelte is by receiving that as a prop. So to receive that, what we can do is we can define the export let classes. So this is saying to Svelte that this is going to be received as a prop, and if we go ahead and log that in, we should see all of the classes data. Let's save it and let's go ahead and reload. And I need to open up the DevTools, and okay, we have it undefined. Okay, so as you can see, we have the data with an array of 10. So we can now loop through each of the data and display that in our select component. So here, okay, I think what I'm gonna do is I'll just first implement the form related data in this, and in the next video I'm gonna implement the dependent dropdown, because I think that will take some time. So yeah, first let's implement the form related stuff, and in the next part we'll be implementing the dependent dropdown. So this is done for now. And okay, before looking into the form, let's look at the documentation for the form. And Inertia comes with a form helper, and we can use this to simplify our form handling. So what we can do is, okay, we have the store server-side validations. We already have that. Okay, we don't have that, but yeah, we can implement that. So okay, let's define the form router let value function handle submit. Okay, we have the form helper, so we are going to use that. So let's go ahead and define that form, and we also need to import this, so we can copy this code, import that here. And by the way I would like to organize the files, so import files is the library related imports. I try to keep them at the top, and the local imports I try to keep them somewhere in middle. So this way we can actually get an idea of what are the imports for this file. So here we need to check what are the data that we need to handle. So we have name, email address, phone number, class, and section. So I'm going to define these. Name is also going to be null. Email, we don't need the password, we actually need the phone number. And class ID is gonna be null, and section ID is also gonna be null. And we don't need the remember me because we are not implementing login or registration for now. So yeah, this should be enough. And by the way, what I'm also doing here is I am keeping the names, the keys for these similar to our database attributes. So this is gonna make it even more easy to handle our forms. So what else do we have? Okay, we need to bind these with our form inputs. So the way we do that is by calling in bind value. So in this case it's form.name. And by the way, one more thing to note here is that I'm using $sign to access the form, because this form under the hood is actually a Svelte store. So to access the Svelte store we use $sign. And okay, we are binding the value with form.name, and we also have an error comment in here, so we'll be implementing this error later. Okay, for the email as well we can do the same. I think we can use GitHub Copilot for this, but it didn't work out, so I'm gonna type it. So bind value is gonna be form.email. Same for phone number, and make sure you bind it in the input, not in the label. Form.phone number. Okay, we also have class. Okay, not in the label, actually inside this select. So bind value form.class ID and form.section ID. Okay, let's see this thing in action. To see that this in action, what we need to do is we need to open up Svelte DevTools, and in this Svelte section we can, okay, let's reload it once because it's not loading the files in here. Okay, now as you can see we have the app, and we can actually select an element in here. Okay, let's select all of it. Okay, this is not the actual behavior. Okay, I think this one. Okay, we have the name, we have the authenticator layout. Okay, I think inside form. Okay, not in the form but main. Okay, so inside this create, I think we should see that. So we have the form use form, we have the form object, and we have the name, email, and all the other stuff. So I think we can zoom that, okay, so that you can see it properly. And now if I type something in here, and as you can see, this data gets reflected in here. So now these two are properly binded. And the next step that we want to do here is, okay, let's work on, okay, submit. So whenever we submit the form, what we want to do is we want to make a post request to our route, the desired route. So I'll define a function called submit. Okay, let's define that in here, function submit, and we want to post it to, where do we want to post? So here as well we can use the route helper. So I want to post it to students.store, and we don't have to pass any data to this because this form already does that under the hood. So that's really simple to deal with. And how do we call this? So whenever we submit the form, and then only then we want to call this function. So we can do that by calling on submit on the form, and we can also pass in the event modifier. So I want to prevent the default behavior, and I want to call the submit function. Okay, this looks good. And what else do we have in here? Okay, we haven't implemented the validation, so I think we should implement that, and in the next part we'll be looking at implementing the dependent dropdown. Okay, so let's do that. So inside student controller, let's create the store method, and let's also create a new request. So that's gonna be store student request. Let's create that request. Artisan make request store student request. Let's import this, and let's also go ahead and define the validation. So on auth, for authenticated users, we can allow the student data creation, and here let's write some validations, and I'm going to use Copilot for this. So name is required, class ID is required and should exist in the classes table. Section ID is also required and should exist in the sections table. And okay, we don't have phone number or roll number, we do have phone number required and string. And what else do we have? Name, okay, we have email, and this should be required email, and let's add in the unique. So inside students table, the email column, okay, these should do. So let's go ahead and implement a simple validations. I'll just use the documentation. So if form.errors.email, then we are gonna display that error inside the create. So let's go ahead and do that for, okay, email, I guess we can do that. So if form.errors.email, then we wanna display that, and maybe we can do text red 500, and we are going to display that error. So form.errors.email. Okay, let's try it out. Let's also save the controller. We'll just dd the request all, so that we'll know that we have all the validations passed. Okay, let's go ahead and test it out. We already have an email for admin@admin.com, and okay, what is this thing displaying here? Okay, let's try to invalidate our data. Click on save, and okay, this didn't submit, I guess, because I didn't click this thing. Or what's the issue? I'm not really sure. Let's check it out. Okay, let's try to debug this thing. I'm not really sure what's happening. So form action method is going to be post on submit, and we also have the button. So maybe I haven't included the button type of submit. Okay, we do have that. So why is it not working? Okay, let's try to log this thing to see whether we are calling this function or not. Let's click on save, and okay, we are making that request, but I'm not really sure what's happening. So maybe this is throwing a validation error, but we are not displaying that properly. So email address, let's try to look into the network tab, and I'll just save it once again. Okay, we are getting a 302 and 200. Okay, we are getting a 302 redirected error. So okay, let's try to remove the request class once and then see what's going on. Okay, we do get this. Okay, my guess is that there's probably some issues with the validation, because I tried excluding the validation and it did work. So we can do some workarounds to this. Okay, let's keep a value of class ID 1 and section ID 2 for these. And okay, let's try it once again. And I'll try to pass in an ID email address that already exists, and click on save, and it's nothing's happening in here. Okay, so the issue was with the form filler. So I filled the form and this passed in some non-numeric data, and then it created some issues because I couldn't see any errors or anything. So now if I pass in a valid phone number and we don't pass in any classes, then I passed in an email address that was already used, and in that case, as you can see, we have an error where the class ID field is required, the section ID field is required. So we can fix that. Okay, we already have the class ID and section ID, but since we are binding that to our form, so for that reason this thing is not working. so we can do, okay, I think I'll just copy these and paste that for the phone number, and let's do the same for the class, and we can do that, and let's also do the same for the section. Okay, that's done. And now if you go reload, and I'll try to add an email address that already exists so that I'll get an error for the email and for the class and section. Okay, we only get an error for the section ID. Okay, I made a mistake in here, so that's the reason. And yeah, this thing reloads whenever you save the changes, so that's one of the annoying things. But yeah, once you get it properly, then you won't have so much of issues. Okay, now as you can see, we have the class ID and section ID field is required validation working. And okay, that's it for this part, and in the next part we'll be looking at fetching the class data, displaying them in here, and then we'll also work on implementing the dependent dropdown. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, so we are still continuing the student record creation part, and let's see where we are. So here we need to implement the submit, and I did keep some default values, so I want to keep it null, and we'll be binding these from the form itself. So let's go ahead and do that first. So we are binding the value for name and email address, phone number, and okay, I think I'm not displaying the error for the name, so I'll just do that right now, otherwise I'll forget it later. So that's done. And okay, instead of email we need the name, and okay, email address is done, phone number is also done. Okay, we need to implement the class, and here what we want to do is, I want to keep the select a class placeholder, and instead of doing the option value equal to class 1, we are going to iterate over each of the classes. So each classes, and by the way, since we are using this resource to get our data, then in that case we need to pass in the dot data as well, because we'll have that data nested inside the data attribute. So each class is dot data as, okay, let's name it single class, because class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, so we can use single class, and the value is going to be single class dot ID, and the name is going to be single class dot name. Okay, let's close the each loop, and now we have the select implemented, and we also have the errors. So if there's a class ID error, then we'll display that. And for the section, we are going to implement the dependent drop down for this. So let's try this out, and then we'll implement that. Okay, as you can see, we have these classes displayed in here, and for the section we are going to implement an API. So we'll make an API call whenever the section or the class data changes. So for that I'm going to use Axios. So let's just install Axios, and while that is installing, let's define a function in here, and let's name it const get sections, and this is going to receive a parameter of class ID. So whenever the class ID changes, then we will pass in that ID, and then we'll make a request. Okay, I think since this is an arrow function, we have to implement it this way. And here what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste the function for this, and then I will explain it to you. So here what we are going to do is, first we are going to check if we have the class ID, and we also need to import the Axios. So let me try VS Code to do that. Okay, it didn't work out, so let's import it manually. So import Axios from Axios, and okay, we also need to implement this API for this. So if we have the class ID, then we are going to use Axios to make a get request to API.sections, and we are also passing in the class ID for this. And then if you have the response, in that case we are going to assign the value. Okay, we haven't defined the sections variable in here. So let's go ahead and do that. So then we are gonna assign the value of the response to sections, and if the class ID is not set, then we are gonna assign an empty array to the sections so that we won't get an error while looping through the sections, because JavaScript will throw an error if this is not an iterable item. So for that case, we are assigning it a value of empty array. Okay, that's done. And now let's go ahead and implement the API. And let's also remove these commented codes because we don't need them. And okay, so let's define that route in here, and route get sections is gonna go to section controller and then call in the invoke method, and the name is gonna be sections. Maybe we can do sections dot index. I think this doesn't really matter because we are using Axios, or maybe we can directly call in. Okay, we are using the route helper, so we can pass that as api.sections.index. And let's go ahead and define the section controller. We don't have that in here. And what we can also do is we can namespace the this controller inside API. So I'll just copy that and artisan make controller API / section controller. Okay, that's done. And let's go ahead and define the method for this. So it's gonna be an invocable function. Okay, so here what I want to do is I want to also define a new request for this, because we will be needing the class ID. So let's validate that. So for that, what we can do is artisan make request list sections data, and we can use that in here. And now we can grab that class ID. We can also remove the input function from here and directly get that class ID. And let's implement the request class. So here we only want to allow the authenticated users, and inside the rules, let's define the validation for class ID, and required integer exists in the class ID. And the way I want to implement this is by passing in the array. I want to do it this way. Okay, we need this, and let's also make it in separate lines. Okay, this looks good. And now let's go ahead and test this out. So how do we test this out? Okay, so since we have the class ID, then we can grab the sections. So let's go ahead and do that. The section where class ID is this class ID, and then get. And I also want to use the resource class in here. So section resource collection, and then pass that in. And okay, I think we can directly return this thing. Okay, this makes sense. And now let's implement that in here. So we have implemented the api.php. So let's save this file, and in the create we will get the response. So let's first log that, and we will debug it if there are any issues. Okay, let's go ahead and test this out. So whenever I select class 5, okay, nothing's happening. Maybe I am not. Okay, one more thing that we need to do here is how would this get sections run? So we are not executing this function yet. So whenever the class ID changes, then in that case we want to run that function. So that is also pretty simple to implement in Svelte. So we can use reactive statements to achieve that. Okay, let's go ahead and check out the reactive statements, and then we'll implement that. Okay, so here we have the reactive statement section, and if you check out this example, then as you can see, this total variable is dependent on y plus x, y plus a value, and then x is being passed. So now whenever the x value changes, then the total is going to be recalculated. So we also want to achieve the same thing. So whenever the class ID changes, then we want to get the sections. So what we can do is we can define a shorter version of this reactive statement. So we don't want to assign it to anything, but we just want to call the get sections whenever class ID changes. And class ID is defined in here, so I think we should pass that in through the form. So we can use the form helper class and then pass that form. And okay, this should work, and if there are any issues, then we'll fix them. Okay, now whenever we change the class value, then we should see the sections data. Okay, Ziggy error route api.sections.index is not in the route list. So this did execute, and we made a exhaust request to api.sections.index. I think there's some issue with the name sections.index. And let's go ahead and check out the route service provider. Okay, so this thing was not working properly and was throwing an exception internally because I didn't have section controller defined. So, or maybe we didn't import it in the API. So for that reason, it was not working as expected. So let's go ahead and do that. So section controller, let's import that from the API, and now it should work. Okay, let's now go ahead and reload this thing. Let's remove these and let's select a class. Okay, route API, and we are still getting that error. So I think what I also want to do here is I want to run the php and route list command again, and let's try to look into this. So here we have API sections.index, which goes to API section controller invoke. So this thing is not being prefixed with the API dot. So let's try to call this thing without API, and let's see whether this works, because this should work, but I'm not really sure why. Okay, 403 forbidden. Okay, so since we are making an API request and the user is not authenticated at this point, so that's the reason we are getting this thing. So I think we need to remove that check, because this page will only be loaded when the user can view this page. So yeah, if the user is authenticated only, then this page will be loaded, and then we are making that request. So adding that additional, we can omit that check. So let's remove that, because implementing that in the API level is something that we need to implement for the sanctum. So yeah, that's not really what we want right now. So in the section controller, let's just pass in true, and we should see that value now. Okay, let's select class 6, and now as you can see, we are getting two sections, ID of 11 and 12 with the value of section A and B, and we also get the class. Okay, we don't have that. We do have that, so class ID and name. So we get these classes as well, and now we can implement the dependent route down. So this was quite simple, even though we had some issues here and there, but still now you know that how to implement this, and you won't have any errors because we have dealt with them already. So we have the sections data. So now what we can do is we can loop over the sections data. So inside, also in the sections section, let's loop over the sections, each sections as section, and so option value is going to be section.id and the label is going to be section.name. So let's save this and let's go ahead and reload and try it out finally one last time. So as you can see, we have these values being displayed in here, and if I only select the placeholder, then I won't see anything. So that thing is also working fine. So the last thing that we want to do in this video is to test whether we have our the store functionality working, and for that we haven't implemented the store function yet. So I'll just paste some code in here to store or create the student record, and student create request validated return redirect route to student.index with the message of student created successfully. So we haven't implemented showing the flash messages yet, so we'll do that in the future. For now I'm just passing this so that we don't have to come back here and implement this later. So this is done, and now let's go ahead and test it out. So I'll just use some form filler, and okay, we need to validate this thing because form filler just generates some random string based phone number and class 9 section A. Let's save it. Okay, general error, address doesn't have a default value, so okay, we don't have that address. I'm not really sure when did we do that. I think while copying the migration file we also got the address. So create students table. Okay, we have this address. So what I'll do is I'll just create a migration and make this nullable because we don't need this. So let's go ahead and do that. Make address nullable on students table. Okay, we don't get that students table in here, so I'll just remove it and pass that table manually. So we can do dash table is gonna be students, and let's go ahead and check it out. Okay, now we have that. Okay, let's remove that one extra D and let's make that address nullable, and on down we can just pass in the default behavior. So in that, so the previous behavior was not nullable, so that's how we can do that. And let's now go ahead and migrate. Okay, and again test it out. So we have the form filled up already, so let's save it, and we are redirected to the index page, and as you can see we have 101th value in here. So this thing is now working fine. So that's it for this part, and in the next part we'll be looking at implementing the edit record. So yeah, that's also going to be an interesting one, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, it's now time to work on the editing part. So whenever we click on the edit button, then we want to display that edit form, and then we want to update the students data. So for that I am gonna copy this whole component and then define a new edit dot svelte, and let's paste that in here. And what else do we need to change? So we are gonna receive a student prop as well along with the classes data. So where did we implement that? Okay, we have that in here. So along with classes we are also gonna receive that student data, and so the get sections, this get sections method, these are all gonna be same. So instead of store we want to call the students dot update, and okay, we also need to pass that student dot id. And since we are also going to use the resource class, so I think we have to use that dot data. And what else do we have in here? So okay, so since we also need some initial values for these, so we are gonna pass that from the student dot data dot name, and let's use GitHub Copilot for these kind of tasks. The class ID is gonna be student.data.class ID. The section ID is also gonna be student.data.section ID, and everything else is gonna be as usual. So only the route here is gonna be different, and these all functions are gonna behave just like it did in the create part. And okay, the submit is done. Use this to create. Okay, instead of this, what we can do is edit student and pass that student.data.name, so that we'll see that, and we can remove this thing because this is not a store, this is a simple variable, JavaScript variable. Maybe we can do update the student data, and everything else looks good. So instead of save, okay, one more thing that I missed in here was the cancel button. So when the user clicks on cancel, then we want to redirect them to, where do we want to redirect them? We want to redirect them to students.index. And for the button, the type is going to be submit, and instead of save, we want to display it as update. And okay, final thing is we need to make changes to the route. So edit button here should point to the edit route. So here, let's replace that with the link. The href is gonna be students.edit, and we are also gonna pass that student.id. And okay, we have some issues in here. I don't know. Okay, this link should be capitalized. And have we imported this thing? Okay, I think we have. Okay, this should now work. And we haven't implemented the edit and update part, so let's go ahead and do that. So edit, we are going to receive the student data through root model binding. And what do we need in here? So just like the create, we are going to need the classes data, and we are going to render the student/edit page, and we are also going to pass that classes data, and along with that we also want to pass that student data. So while we are here, let's also implement the update. And okay, just like we have the store student request, let's define that make request update student request, and we can copy everything from here. And we are also going to receive that student data through root model binding. And let's go ahead and define the validations. So here it's going to be auth check, and for the validations, okay, this looks good. And the only thing that is different here is required string email max 255 unique to student's email except this student ID. So this here refers to the request, and since we are using the root model binding, so we are going to get that student model from there, and then we are passing in the ID to this, and should exist. Okay, that's fine, and this should now work. And you also need to make sure that the code generated by Copilot is accurate, so you should double check it and make sure that everything looks good. Otherwise these kind of issues really take some time to debug, and this is something that I have faced as well, so make sure to double check it properly. And okay, this looks good. So now what we can do is, just like for the store method, we can do the same for the update as well. So here, instead of passing in the students create, we can do student update, and we want to redirect to students.index with student details updated successfully. Okay, let's go ahead and give this thing a try, and we'll fix some issues if there are any. Okay, source link specifier in Svelte package. Where is this coming from? Index.svelte. Okay, I made some mistakes in here as well. So in the edit page, edit button, students.edit link. Okay, maybe we haven't imported. We have that. Okay, this was imported automatically, so let's remove that and this should work. Okay, let's try to edit this student. If I click on edit, then okay, we have some errors in here. Let's try to debug it. Uncomment in promise cannot exist student before initialization. So let's see, are we passing that in? Okay, we are passing that student data. And okay, the ordering matters in here. This is something that I realized just now. So what we are doing here is we are calling everything in here first. So all the operations, we are doing that in here, and at the end we are defining the export related statement. So we should do that first, and only then we should do other operations, because this thing, what this Svelte does to this internally is it's gonna define these variables, and then only we can use the references for these. So let's save this and let's try to reload it now. Okay, link is not defined, so seems like we haven't imported that. So let's import that from here. Okay, maybe we can directly do that here. Okay, now as you can see, we have the name, email address, phone number, and the class and section ID are not being populated in here. So we need to check that out. Student.data.class ID and section ID. Okay, so the reason why this thing is not working is I tried to debug it, and as you can see, we have these data been filled up, but the class ID and section ID are empty in here. So let's try to look into the student object, because since we are passing that from the, okay, let's try to look into the student resource first, and then you'll understand why is this thing not working. So here we are passing that class and section, so inside the class, and then we can access the ID. So let's go ahead and do that. So student.data.class.id and section.id. So that's how we can access the class ID and section ID. So now if we go ahead and reload, okay, what's the problem in here? Each only iterates over array like objects. Okay, let's try to look into the student object, and then you'll get an idea. And for now, I'm just gonna remove these. Let's save it, and okay, this thing is now been displayed, and we have the data. Inside data we have class and then ID, student.data.class.id. Let's try to access that. Let's save and reload. Okay, we get the ID of 1, but we are also getting an error about, so each only iterates over array like objects. So somewhere in edit.svelte 162.56, let's try to look into that. 162. Okay, we have the each sections as section, so this thing is throwing an error in here. Okay, one thing that we need to fix here is initially the value of sections is, so this is going to be undefined, so that could be one of the issues. So what I'm going to do is I'll just assign an empty array, and since we are running in the asynchronous functions in here like the get sections, so while this is running, this value is undefined, and the DOM already gets rendered. So while that is being rendered and while we are making that asynchronous call, so the value of sections is undefined. So that's the reason. So I guess that's the reason why we are getting that error about the for each only loops through array objects. So let's see if this thing fixes it. I'll just save that, and if we try to reload, okay, now as you can see, we have the class ID is already been selected, but the section ID is not. So maybe we should look into that as well. So we have the section ID, and okay, so I tried looking into this, and the solution here is to implement the selected attribute in here. So this is something that works by default in Vue. So if you are binding with to something, so that already works by default. So since you are binding that with to the select with the form.section ID, so that would already be selected. But in Svelte, we have to implement that. So we can do that by passing in selected, and the condition here is gonna be that if the section.id is equal to student.data. So in this case it's section.id, and I was trying these out behind the scenes. So here as well we can either do this like passing in the section ID as the actual value, otherwise we can use these class and sections relationship as well. So since we are already loading that, so it won't really matter in this case. So here as well, section.id, so we are using the relationship and then accessing the ID. So let's save this, and now try to read. And as you can see, we have the class 1 and then section A being selected already. So yeah, this is how you implement it. So now let's try to update the data. So class 6 and section B, let's update it. And okay, one issue that I noticed but I didn't implement that earlier is instead of post, now we need to make a put request to the update. So that's the default Laravel behavior. And class 6 or class 5 section B, so we are editing the ID too. So yeah, let's update it, and we should be redirected, but we are not. So I'm not really sure what's happening. 405 not allowed. Okay, this is something that was from the previous error. Okay, we are getting some validation related errors. So where's that coming from? Okay, let's try to look into the validations. I just implemented that using GitHub Copilot, so that could be the issue. Required string, required string, required string, required. Okay, address. We don't have the address. We have phone number. So name, email, phone number, class ID, and we also have section ID. So let's do that as well. And here it's going to be sections. Okay, name, email, phone number, class ID, and section ID. Okay, this should work. So let's try to update it once again. And now we are redirected to the index page and class 5 section B. Okay, this seems to work. So this is done. Creating and editing is done. In the next part, we will be looking at deleting the records, and further we will work on other stuff. So one of the things that we need to implement later is implement the pagination. So we'll look into that as well. So that's it for this part, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, so it's time to work on the record deletion part. So this should be pretty simple as well. So first, let's go ahead and implement that on the backend. So let's call in the destroy method, and we are also going to receive the student as the root model binding, and we are going to delete the student and return redirect to student.index with the message student deleted successfully. Okay, that's done. And the next step is to implement that on the index. So here we have a delete button. So here what I want to do is on click of this button, what I want to do, okay, we first need this, and on click of this button I want to call a function called handle delete, and we are also going to pass in the student ID because we'll need that to identify the student data. So, and by the way, I'm also passing in a function and then calling this function, because if I call this function directly without passing in what do you say to this thing, so without calling this function inside the nested function, then this would be called directly, and that would be called directly. So if we are implementing that handle delete without any confirmation or anything, so all of the records would be deleted. I guess I haven't tried that, but that could happen. So for that reason, so if you're passing in some parameters, so you should pass that inside a nested function. So yeah, that's one of the things to note. So let's go ahead and define that handle delete method. So okay, so the exports should be on top, and const handle delete is gonna be a function, and this is also gonna receive a student ID. And here what we want to do is we want to call in the confirm method. So we are not going to use Axios for this because we can actually use the form helper to implement this. So if confirm, are you sure you want to delete the student, then we can define a new form. So let delete form is gonna be use form, and okay, that's imported, and we don't have to pass any initial values to this because we are only gonna make a delete request. Okay, let's try to implement this now. Okay, one thing that I should do here is this. So yeah, that looks good. And delete form dot delete, and we are gonna make pass in the students dot destroy route and also passing in the student ID. So yeah, this should now work. So let's try to implement this. Let's click on delete, and are you sure you want to delete the student? Click on cancel, nothing's gonna happen. And if I try to delete it, okay, let's see what's happening in here. Delete form dot delete is not a function. Okay, so to access these forms, we have to use the $sign. So this is something we did earlier, but we forgot to implement that here. So this should work now. Okay, let's remove these and try to delete the student ID 1. Click on OK, and now as you can see that ID is deleted. So yeah, that's working. And in the next part, what do we have? Okay, we will implement refactoring. So what we are going to do is we have these validation errors in here, so we are gonna define a separate component for displaying the validation and then passing in the validation messages, and then yeah, we are gonna make some refactoring to that, and in the later part we'll implement the flash message and then work on the pagination. So yeah, see you guys in the next one. Okay, so let's work on refactoring the validation displaying part, and we are gonna make it a bit better. So what I'll do is I'll just create a new component called, okay, we already have that in here. So I think this came with the Breeze package. So yeah, we can use this thing, and we are gonna pass in a message prop, and we are checking if we have them. If we have the message, only then we are displaying this message in here. So we can use this in the create page. So let's go ahead and do that. So instead of passing in the forms.errors.name, what we can do is we can input error, and the message is gonna be forms.errors.name, and we also need to import this thing from the components input error.svelte. And now we can do the same for other fields as well. So I think GitHub Copilot will work in this case, but it didn't. So let's go ahead and do that ourselves. Okay, now it's gonna do it. Let's do the same for the phone number as well. And this thing is giving an incomplete suggestions for the class ID and for the section ID. Okay, let's give it a try. And if this thing is working fine, then we'll implement that in the edit page as well. So what I'll do is I'll just pass in an email address. Okay, we are getting an disabled issue. So I already implemented this in the Breeze package. So the disable attribute for the buttons. So that's coming from there, I guess. But yeah, this does not really matter because okay, this is coming from the content script. So this is the issue related to the form filler extension. So yeah, you can ignore that, and let's try to pass an email that already exists, and let's select a section, click on save. Okay, we were redirected back. Okay, we didn't have that email address, I guess, because this is the students table and the email address existed for the users table. So yeah, this should now throw a validation error. Save, and okay, the email has already been taken, and it's also working for this as well. So yeah, this looks good. And now let's go ahead and implement that for the edit page as well. These are all simple stuff, so if you have followed along all this while, then they should be pretty simple for you. And one more thing that I want to mention here is that instead of passing in the input fields and labels like this, we can use the input label and these components that are already available to us, so we can use them. But yeah, let's see, I think I might implement that later. But this is really simple stuff, so you can implement that yourself as well. So yeah, let's continue this part for now and let's finish it. Okay, this thing is not working so well. So form.errors.email, and the same for the class ID. Input error message is going to be form.errors.class ID, and let's do the same for the section ID as well. Okay, this should now work. So yeah, that's it for this part, and in the next part we will be looking at implementing the flash messages. So we'll be displaying those messages in the front end. So whenever we send in any flash messages from the backend, so we are gonna do it in a proper way. And yeah, that's also gonna be an interesting one. So see you guys in the next one. Okay, so in this video we'll be implementing the flash messages, so displaying the flash messages whenever we send something from the backend. So yeah, that's gonna be an interesting one as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So we are gonna implement that using the middleware that we have that comes with Inertia. So handle Inertia requests, and here what we can do is we can pass in any data that we want to be displayed or that we want access in the front end. Like as an example, here we have the auth and user, and we are passing in the auth user. And by the way, this is something that comes with Inertia itself. So when we install, this is something that already comes in the framework itself. So as an example, this is being shown here. So here what I also want to do is, along with the auth, I want to pass in an additional array with the key of flash, and the one of the keys values is going to be a message and the type. So depending on the type, we are either going to display a success, error, or any other messages. And the message is the actual content itself. So the message is we are taking in the request session and then getting the message properly, and the type is the same, so we are getting in the request session get type, and the default is going to be success. So yeah, keep that in mind. So let's save this, and now whenever we pass anything from the backend, like in our case we have student controller, and whenever we pass anything like return redirect route to student.index with the message student deleted successfully. So we are not passing any type in here because the default is going to be success. And if you want to pass in the type, then what you can do is we can pass in an array, and we can pass in the type in here like danger. So yeah, this is how it works. And yeah, just wanted to give you an idea about how to deal with that. So here the default is going to be success and the message is being passed. So how do we implement that in the front end? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement a new component, and so that we can reuse that everywhere. So I am going to define a new component inside components, and let's name it alert component dot svelte. And here as well I'm gonna paste some code so that I don't have to type everything. And here what we are doing is we are receiving that message, and again we are receiving the type, and the default is success. So yeah, just making sure that we don't get an error if we don't pass anything. And if message and type is if we have the message and if the type is success, then we are going to display this with the message being passed in here. And if we have the message and the type is going to be error, then we are going to display this. And we also have to make sure that we have the message, otherwise we might render only this part with the message as empty string. So that would also get rendered, I guess. So yeah, checking these things is always a good practice. And yeah, now what we can do is we can make use of this thing in here. So here I have a section for alerts. So what we can do is we can define that alert component, and the message is gonna be, what would it be? So we can receive that as a prop. So how do we receive that? Let's go ahead and check out the Inertia doc, and okay, share data. So whenever we share anything, we can receive that as a prop on the front end. So where's that? Okay, yeah, we have the page from the Inertia Svelte and page.props and then the value whatever we passed from the middleware. So yeah, let's import that first and then we'll look into that. Import, I think we can directly import that in here because they are all inside the same namespace. Okay, that looks good. And page.props is the code to access our props. So we can do that in here. Okay, the message is gonna be page.props.flash.message. So this is something that we define in the handle inertia request middleware. So flash.message. So we are passing that message to this component, and if we have the value, then if we have the message in here, then in that case we are displaying that here. Okay, so let's go ahead and give it a try by trying to delete a user or a student. Let's reload, and maybe we haven't imported this component, so that's the reason why it's throwing an error. So let's try to reload it once again, and now this should work. Let's delete a user, click on OK, and now as you can see we have that last message being displayed in here called student deleted successfully. So you can do the same for other type of messages as well, whether you have warnings, whether you have errors. So depending on the type and the message, so depending on the type, you can display these code blocks accordingly. And yeah, that's also an interesting use case, and yeah, it was fun to implement. So that's it for this video, and in the next part we'll be looking at implementing the pagination. So yeah, that's also going to be an interesting one, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, so in this video we will be working on implementing the pagination, that too on the server side. So basically there are two ways to implement pagination. One is client side. So on the front end, we'll be implementing the pagination by loading all of the data and then using JavaScript to move through other pages, so page 1, 2 and 3. And the other one is to implement it on the server side. So we'll first initially load 10 records, and then on request we will dynamically load additional data. So that way we only render or return the data that the user needs. So the most performant way to implement is on the server side. And the drawback about client-side pagination is that if we have around 1,000 or even millions of records, maybe there might be some cases where you have them, and implementing them on the front end, what happens is we have to load all of the million records at once and then implement the pagination. So yeah, that's one of the disadvantages of implementing client-side pagination. So we'll be implementing that on the backend or on the server side. So first I want to go ahead and in the index.svelte I have already created a markup for this. So I'll just paste that, and this is the markup for the a tag, so the link for the pagination. So these are individual links and we'll loop through them. And here we have these simple markup that says showing 1 to 10 of 100 results. So yeah, that's also needed. And let's go ahead and check this out, and then we'll implement that. So as you can see, we have showing 1 to 10 of 100 results, and here we'll also show the links. So for now it is commented out. And to implement the pagination, let's go ahead and on the controller, what you want to do here is, instead of passing all of the data, we can call in the paginate method, and by default I think this is gonna paginate by 15 records, so I'm going to keep that as a default. And now if we go ahead and check out our students data, so this data, let's just console.log it, console.log students, and then as you can see that we have some paginator related data in here that is provided by Laravel, so we can use that to render or implement pagination. So we have inside the data array, we have these 15 data, and inside links and meta, as you can see, we have these pagination links and also the current page, from, last page, links, and all the other stuff. So we can use these to implement the pagination. So okay, let's get rid of that, and what we can do is we can loop over the links. So first I want to display the from and to for this, so we have that inside. Okay, we can use the meta actually. So meta consists of everything: current page, from, last page, links. So we want these links to be displayed in a loop, and everything else looks good. Okay, so here students dot meta dot, what do we have, from, to, and total. Okay, we can make use of this students dot meta dot from. Okay, and let's copy that and paste that in here, and this is gonna be 2 and this is the total. Let's save that and let's check it out. And as you can see, we have showing 1 to 15 of 100 results. So this is the dynamic data. That's done, and here we want to loop through each of the links and display them. So that's inside the links array. As you can see, we have all of these links, and we also have properties like whether this link is active or not. So depending on that, we can enable or disable the button. We can display the labels. So we also have next and previous. So yeah, everything is already there. So let's loop over each of the data. So students dot links as link, so it's not links but meta dot links, and let's close the each loop, and let's go ahead and comment this thing. Okay, yep, that looks good. let's uncomment that. And since I'm naming it link, so I have already implemented that. So if the link is active or if there's no URL, then we want to disable this button. And I want to replace the a tag with a link tag provided by Inertia, because while paginating I want to create the SPA like experience. I don't want to reload the whole browser. So yeah, for that we can use a link, and we can also apply these classes. So if we have the active state or the active property is true, in that case I want to apply these classes, otherwise I want to apply all of these classes. And to display the label, what's happening is this is the escaped HTML. So to properly render this thing, we can pass in the HTML, so @HTML, and then pass in the label. So now this will properly display the HTML version of this label. And okay, I think this should work. So we'll implement the link for this, but let's go ahead and check out whether we have the proper links being displayed. Now as you can see, we have all of these links, and this is okay, this is not rendered, this is not disabled because we are currently using a tag or href. Okay, this should work, but I think we should reload it once. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not working, but disabled. Okay, I'm not really sure whether we can apply disabled to link tags, partial active states. Okay, maybe we can't do that. So if okay, what we can do is, one of the workarounds to this could be, if the link.active is true, then we'll pass in link. Okay, I think we can do one thing, as button. Let's try this out. And now this is disabled and this should work. Okay, that makes sense. So href is gonna be link.url. So this should go to the URL that is inside the link, that is in the link object, and everything else should work now. Okay, let's go ahead and test it out once, and we'll fix if there are any issues. So now this is disabled. If I click on 2, then we go to page 2 without the full browser reload, and we also have ID from 18 to 32. So this means that we are actually paginating. And one more thing that I want to fix here is that when I click on these links and I go back to the top of the page, so what I want to do is I want to stay in this state itself. So in this scroll position, I don't want to reset the scroll position. So for that, Inertia also comes with a scroll preserve attribute, so we can use that. Where's that? Okay, there's a preserve scroll. You have scroll preservation, so we can pass in the preserve scroll function or option, and that's gonna preserve our scroll behavior. So let's pass that in, and let's try to reload. Okay, I think we don't have to. So now if I click on link 5, then as you can see, I stay in that position and the scroll is now preserved. So that's the desired behavior that I want. And yeah, we are done with the pagination. And what else do we have? Okay, I also want to implement working with image uploads, so we'll do that in the next video. Okay, so this is the final part of our series about the Inertia Svelte Student Management System series, and in this video we'll be looking at how we can install the media library and work on image uploads. So I'll be using this package to implement the image uploads, because this package makes it really easy to integrate file handling and image uploads. So yeah, let's start by installing this package, and we might need to make some changes in here. Let me just, okay, so let's open up the terminal, and I'm gonna type, okay, we already have that. So composer requires party Laravel media library. Let's hit enter, and okay, that seems good. And there are a few installation steps that we need to perform. So let's publish our migrations. That's done, and we also need to migrate. Okay, this is also base table or view already exists, table media already exists. Okay, so I tried this myself, and that's the reason why we have these migrations already executed. Yeah, so we can get rid of that, and we need to run the migrations. Okay, that's done. Let's publish the config file. Okay, so once this is done, we can now work on our project. So that is adding in the image upload feature. So for that, let's go to the create.svelte, and here I'm gonna copy this code and paste that in below this input field, and the label is gonna be avatar. Let's update the for attribute and also the id attribute along with the bind attribute and the error attribute. So it's gonna be avatar, and okay, input type is gonna be file. And to bind the files within Svelte, what we need to do is, instead of passing in value, we can bind it with files, and this would give us the form data object, the JavaScript object, and then we can deal with the file handling just as we do in Laravel. So that's gonna be really simple, and everything else looks good. Okay, we need to add this avatar key in our form helper inside the form object. So here we can add it with the default with the initial value of null. So okay, let's save this and go ahead and reload our browser. Okay, it's not reloaded. Okay, we have that here. Okay, won't really matter. So after phone number we have that, and what else do we need to do? So we need to implement file handling or image upload in the backend. So for that, let's check out student controller, and in the store, once we have the student data, we can attach media to this. So we have that inside. Okay, we also need to prepare the model layer. That's something that I forgot. So let's copy that, go to the student model because we want to associate it with this model. Let's import the trait, and we also need to implement this as media. Let's also import this thing, and okay, we are good to go. Now we can attach the media to our model. So to attach that, we have associating files, we have that model, and then we can add media to media collection. Okay, I'll just copy this code, and inside the store, what we want to do is we want to attach that image. So okay, not in here, but in student controller we have store method. So we need the model instance. So what I'll do is I'll just assign this with a value of student into the variable student, and now we can use the student model. We want to add the media. Okay, so the way we get the media from the request is by we'll get an array. So as you can see in the create.svelte, we are binding multiple files. So by default this supports multiple file uploads, so we'll get an array, and from there we will grab the first one. So let's go ahead and check out how this looks, and then we'll implement that. So let's dd the request avatar property, and let's see the result. So now if we go ahead and add in some data, and let's select class and section, let's choose a file. Okay, where do I have that? Pictures. Okay, maybe we can choose this, and if we click on save, okay, email is already taken. Let's save, and now as you can see we get an array, and inside that array we have these lists of uploaded file attributes. So this is the Laravel class, uploaded file class, and we can use this to manipulate or store the file now. So yeah, we need to get the first item if we want to store a single item for this. So we'll get that by using the index 0. Okay, so we want to add the media from the avatar input, and we want to get the first item, and so we also need to pass that to media collection, and this should now add or upload the file and do all the other stuff for us. So yeah, let's go ahead and test this out. And okay, we already have this file, so let's save this and we are redirected to the index with the notification that the student was created successfully. And if we go ahead and check out storage, app, public, so these two are something that I tried myself. So inside the three we have this screenshot. Yep, so this thing is working. And let's also go ahead and test out our database, and as you can see we have this record being created. So how do we display that in the index? So that's also pretty simple. So I want to display that after the phone number. So I'll just copy this TD, and here I want to pass in the student.avatar, and let's wrap this inside an image tag, and the source is gonna be student.avatar. Let's also pass in an alt of student.name, and okay, let's also pass in a width of 200 pixels because I don't want to make it large. Okay, let's save this, and now if we go ahead and test it out, I think, okay, we need to make one more change. So in the student resource we are not passing anything. So to pass this, what we can do is in the avatar key we want to get the first media URL, and so this is the media collection. So since we are not using any media collections for now, so we can keep this empty. So yeah, this should now work. Let's save that and let's reload, and we should see an image in here. Okay, we don't see that. So what we did was we created a new record, so we need to check out the last record. Okay, as you can see we have that in here, and I removed that width thing while testing out, so I'll just add that again. And we also need to add a header after the phone number for the avatar. Yeah, this looks good. And by the way, what you can also do is you can assign an accessor for this. So get avatar property, and then inside that accessor you can pass in this function. So yeah, that's up to you. And I think we are done for the display and create. Now I want to work on the edit part. So here we'll get that avatar, so student.data.avatar, and we can display that in here. So okay, I think we can copy this thing. We can copy the whole markup, and okay, we all will also face a weird issue while dealing with file uploads in Inertia, and I'll also show you a fix about how we can fix that. So yeah, let me just hold these for now, and we'll have that image in here. We are binding that to form.avatar, and okay, let's save this. And now if we go ahead and edit, then we get an error. Input error is not defined. Okay, I made some mistakes in here, so I'll just import that, save that. Okay, I want to display the image in here if we have that. So what we can do is we can pass in the image. Source is gonna be student.avatar. Okay, I don't want to pass in any alt, but we can pass that inside this div so that they would have the same width. Okay, I think it should be student.data.avatar. Okay, this image is huge, so I'll just pass in a width of 300 pixels. Looks good. And let's also add in a margin bottom of 5. Okay, so that's done, and let's also check whether we have that avatar or not. Only then we want to display this thing. So let's pass that inside if student.data.avatar. Only then we want to display that. Okay, let's work on the update part now. So we need to, okay, we already added that, added the avatar property. So let's go ahead and implement that on the update. So this should be same for the update as well. We are currently not deleting the old images. Maybe I'll do that somewhere in the future. For now, I only want to add that media. And okay, this should work as expected, but it won't, because Inertia has some weird issues while dealing with file uploads. So whenever we make any put request, and if the form consists of some files, then we get some issues. So what I'll do is I'll just dd request all in here, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'll just choose a file inside pictures. Let's upload this file and update. And as you can see, we are getting some validation errors in here. So we already have those data, but still we get these validation errors, and it took me quite some time to figure this out. And if we get rid of the dedicated form request class and just try to pass in these values, then we get an empty request array. So yeah, this has some issues. So to fix this, what we need to do is, it's mentioned in the docs as well, so we won't make the put request directly from here. What we'll do is we'll make a post request, and in the form we'll pass in a method property that says put. So now this will make a put request, but from the browser it's gonna make a post request. So yeah, this is gonna fix that bug, and we have it saved. So now if we reload it and choose a file and try to update, then as you can see, we get all of the form data along with the avatar, uploaded avatar, and now we can deal with that. So yeah, that's the general flow for handling file uploads in Inertia. So yeah, okay, let's save this and give it a try one last time. So this has the black bordered image in here, so I'll just choose another one. Okay, this doesn't has any black border, so I'll just choose that and click on update, and now we are redirected to the index page. Let's go to the 7th page, and okay, since we are not deleting the image, so we are getting that first item. So I think we can get the last item from that. I'm not really sure whether that method exists or not. So we can get the last media URL, and let's see if this works. Okay, we get an error. We don't have that get last media URL. Okay, so since we are getting the first item from the media collection, so to change that we can use a workaround. So if you go ahead and check out the interacts with the media trait, then the way the get first media class is implemented is by calling in this get media. So by default the collection name is default, and it also passes in the filters, and then this returns a collection, and here it is returning the first item from the collection. So to get the last item, what we can do is inside the student resource we can do kind of similar functionality. So get media and then get the last item, and then get the URL for that. So this should work, and this is something that I tested it myself. So here I'll comment this out and go ahead and reload this page. Okay, call to a member function, get URL on null. So this error is coming in because we don't have the media for other records for all the records. So we can get rid of it by calling in the optional parameter in here, this get media last get URL. Okay, let's save this, reload, and okay, now as you can see we are getting that last item from that media, and it should work in here as well. Okay, this took some time, which I must admit, but I hope that you learned some stuff along the way, and there are a few things here and there that I want to fix up in this video itself, since this is the last video. So yeah, it might get a bit lengthy, but yep, let's fix up some issues. So the first thing that I want to do here is I want to create a separate component for the pagination. So we can do that by extracting this whole thing to a separate pagination component. So let's go ahead and do that. Pagination dot svelte save that, and we'll get these data as a prop. So let's go ahead and define that. Export let data, and I think we also need links in here. So okay, let's first replace the students with data, and let's import the link. What else do we need? Okay, we don't need anything else. Let's save this, and now we can use that in here. So pagination, okay, not this, but pagination data is students. Okay, this looks good. Let's save that and check it out. Okay, this seems to work fine. So yeah, that's done. And other things that you can do here is you can actually create or maybe refactor these into using the components that we already have in here, like input table, input error. Yeah, so just like the text input, so you can use these and probably make this a lot cleaner, and the UI would also be a bit consistent with the Breeze package. If you have that use case, and you can do that. And one more thing I want to implement here is we don't have any title in here. We can implement this by providing in the Svelte head. So this is something that comes with Svelte, so we can pass in title, create student, and you can also pass in the app name in here by using the page.props. So the prop from the middleware, we can do that. So I'll just show that to you right now. So here, let's pass in app name, and we can use config for that, config app.name, and we can use that in here. So page dot props dot app name. Okay, let's see if this works, and then we'll fix if there are any issues. Okay, I think we need to import this page, so we can do that from Inertia package itself. So yep, let's save that and let's test it out. Maybe we need to reload this thing. Okay, we did that inside the create, so let's go to the create page, and as you can see, we get that create student with the app name that is coming from the backend. So yeah, that's one of the improvements. And what else do we have? Okay, I think that is okay. One more thing that I noticed here is I want to apply the active link for all the student CRUDs on the create and edit page. So we can do that on the nav. Do we have the nav? Okay, we don't have that, so that's inside authenticated layout. So we can pass in active links to these. Active is if route.current is students.index. So let's pass in some additional data to this, or route.current is students.create, students.edit. Okay, these are the only ones that we need. So now whenever we are on the create or on the edit, then this is gonna be an active link. So yeah, these are the things that I wanted to implement in the final video, and I hope that you learned some new stuff along the way. And yeah, that's it for this series, and I'll see you guys in the next one.